They've always felt that they had an enemy in Ethiopia. So sometimes to keep the unity of the people, you have to cultivate an invisible enemy. And that invisible enemy was Ethiopia. And that aim was Greater Somalia. He took that dream out of them. And there was no cohesive thing to keep the Somalis together. The same case in the Middle East. If today Israel gives back the Arab territories, believe you me, there would no Arab...
With Soviet benefactors gone, Bahre was severely weakened. The war had crippled the country financially. He had to realign. Despite being politically unsure of Bahre, the Americans were acutely aware of the growing Soviet superiority in the region. The Soviets had built major military facilities in the Dalek Islands in the Red Sea, air and naval bases in Aden, and on the island of Socotra. The US therefore signed an agreement with Bahre in August 1980, giving them unlimited access to airfields and docks in Berbera, Kismayo and Mogadishu, so countering Soviet power in the region. Meanwhile, the Saudis, the biggest importers of Somali livestock, had started their ranches in Australia. Exports plummeted. Somalia was sitting on oil fields that would have been easier and cheaper to exploit than the Middle Eastern ones. The country momentarily appeared tranquil until Ethiopia's sudden revenge attacks were launched in 1982 and 83. Funded by Ethiopia, the Somali national movement, based on the Isaac clan, waged a guerrilla war in the north. Bahre found himself fighting his own people. A complex character, Bahre was also prepared to give people a second chance. He had released Aidid after 6 years' imprisonment. Resentment at his imprisonment reinforced Aidid's original dislike of Bahre. A desire for revenge became increasingly apparent. An embattled army and an empty treasury forced Bahre to sign a peace treaty with Ethiopia in April 1988. Deprived of its funding by the treaty, the SNM launched a desperate attack on the north, overrunning Barao and occupying part of Hargeisa. Bahre was furious and unleashed the full strength of his forces against the rebels. Mercenaries bombed the rebel cities, as many Somali pilots refused to kill their own people. Artillery barrages finished the job.
The SNM policy militarily seemed to me to be very misguided. They rushed straight into Hargeisa, occupied a part of the town and tried to hold it. The government troops there then simply shelled that part of the town and used their MiG and Hunter aircraft to bomb it. And I've been there since, and it is a most horrific sight. I mean, they've just destroyed that part of the town. Obviously, the government forces bear the main responsibility. They actually did the shelling and the bombing. But it was a very bad military move for the SNM to try and hold part of the town and conquer the rest of it. I mean, it would have been much more sensible to try and cut it off and to bring it down by siege, rather than just seize the town by force. And of course, they were eventually forced to withdraw from Hargeisa.
Atrocities were committed by both sides. These 90 bodies in this mass grave were murdered police and government officials. Both sides deny responsibility. Bahre's forces now find themselves in the same position as the British in the 1900s. Bahre controlled the towns, while the SNM guerrillas adopted the Mad Mullah's tactics and controlled the bush. In an attempt to restrict the rebel movements, government forces indiscriminately mined areas where nomads congregated, particularly water wells. 5 years on, these mines are still killing and maiming people, despite the efforts of international clearance teams.
Well, I think when terrorists come to occupy or fight with the aim of disconnecting the country, any country in the world should have done this. This is what happened in Britain. what happens in Italy, what happens in everywhere in the world. That there are hell of disturbance, and who have the right to defend the unity and peace and security of his own nation should have taken some decision, or even why.
In fact, he told me personally, when I was an ambassador, he said, I would rather like people to fear me than respect me or like me. And this is the main reason why he gave instructions that Hargeisa, the second capital of Somalia, should be bombarded and razed to the ground.
The savagery of his reaction to the SNM and other opposition groups convinced most of the population that he must go.
And towards the end, he more and more played off one clan against another and destroyed the old Somali leadership. I understand that a lot of the old leaders, the sort of people who could sit down and work out a peaceful solution to a problem, were either imprisoned or discredited in one way or another. And so that when the end came, there was no common leadership in the country that could actually sit down and work out a solution to Somali's problems.
These are our best
Several years after his release, Xildiidtv had requested and obtained the ambassadorship to India. However, within 2 years, the Indian government, objecting to some of his political and commercial activities, asked for his recall. Avoiding Barre's attempts to isolate him, he made his way to Addis Ababa, where, with the aid of the Ethiopian government, he helped set up the United Somali Congress, based on his own Hawiya clan.
All peoples have their divisions. The danger is that in times of crisis, in the history of all nations, then natural divisions widen. And that is the tragic situation today.
Ever more insecure, Barre hit out at the slightest criticism. A prime example occurred in September 1990.
In the stadium, September 1990, he was there to watch a football game. Few people booed at him. He couldn't accept that. How could somebody shout at me? And the soldiers with him had opened fire. A lot of people, not less than 500 people, were killed at that time.
Meanwhile, the population of Mogadishu rebelled and, joined by Xildiidt's militia, forced Barre to flee to Gedo.
Nobody overthrew me. I left Mogadishu if I could have preferred the lives of the people and the property, the social property of the country. And therefore, I believe, not because I believe, but I am the president of the Northern Country.
In hot pursuit, Xildiidt's forces indulged in an orgy of murder, rape and looting. 500 were bayoneted to death against this pillar. These men were tortured to extort their savings.
His name is again?
His name is Haji Muhammad.
In Xildiidt's absence, a conference in Djibouti appointed Ali Mahdi interim president. The millionaire hotelier was only recognized as president by his own Abgal sub-clan, centered on Mogadishu. Xildiidt's attempt to remove Mahdi led to intense fighting in mid-November 1991.